colleagues, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 20.
Welcome to meeting number 28 of the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans.
Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4 and the order of reference from the House received on February 26, the committee is meeting to commence consideration of the main estimates 26-27.
Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format according to the standing orders, and members can participate in person or via Zoom.
Before we continue, I would like to ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, but particularly the interpreters. I'd just like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. And just a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Pour les députés présents dans la salle, si vous...
For members in the room, if you want to take the floor, please put your hand up. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and myself will do our best to keep a speaking order and would like to thank you for your patience.
For the purpose of opening the discussion on main estimates 26-27, I now call vote 1 under the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. With that, I would like to welcome the Honourable Joanne Thompson, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, as well as Paul McKinnon, the very, very recently named Deputy Minister. Congratulations. Niall O'Day, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy, and Patrick Amiot, Chief Financial Officer. So with that, we're going to start with opening remarks from Minister Thompson. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a pleasure to be here for my 4th appearance at the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. The 2026-2027 main estimates for Fisheries and Oceans Canada aim to continue to grow our fisheries and drive economic growth in coastal, rural, and Indigenous communities. One of the key items from the main estimates that I would like to highlight is $36.9 million in additional funding to repair and maintain small craft harbors. Since 2015, we have invested more than $1.5 billion in our small craft harbors in B-based funding. This is on top of the annual A-based funding. Our fishing harbors are the lifeblood of our coastal communities, and that is why we have made such serious investments. Across the globe, people want Canadian seafood. It is the best in the world. It's ethical, sustainable, and the highest quality product. Canada's fish and seafood industry contributes over $8 billion to our economy and provides over 63,000 jobs. More than 100 countries around the world import Canadian fish and seafood. This sector is a massive economic driver for our coastal communities. Just last week, I led Canada's delegation to this year's Seafood Expo North America in Boston to support Canadian harvesters, processors, and exporters and ensure Canadian seafood is on the menu. I spoke with our amazing harvesters and businesses about how we can continue to support their jobs and grow our fisheries. To build Canada strong, our new government is squarely focused on supporting the sector to drive innovation and expand markets to grow our economy. That is why our government has committed to renewed fisheries funds for Atlantic Canada, Quebec, and British Columbia. The fisheries funds unlock potential and help Canadian fish and seafood harvesters and businesses thrive in the face of shifting global dynamics. I spoke with my Atlantic and Quebec counterparts in Boston last week to kick off these negotiations, and we'll be speaking with Minister Gill of BC tomorrow to do the same. I hope to work with the provinces with the goal of building fisheries funds that tackle the realities of the current global landscape and drive innovation, sustainability, and productivity so that Canada's fish and seafood sector is set up for sustained growth. In a rapidly shifting global environment, Canada's fish and seafood sector needs the tools to adapt, grow, and seize these new opportunities. This funding will be critical to the businesses and projects that help drive Canada's fish and seafood sector forward. One consistent comment I have heard in my meetings with ambassadors and most recently in Boston was how impressed global buyers are with the sustainability of Canadian seafood. When our fisheries are sustainable and ethical, it means higher prices for harvesters' catches and both immediate and long-term added value for the sector. It also means our fisheries are there for communities now and for our children and grandchildren for generations to come. That starts with science-based fishery management. When we do rigorous science and make the right targeted investments, it informs good fisheries management decisions and tells global buyers that when they buy Canadian seafood, they can trust that it is sustainable and ethically harvested. Our government's recent work with industry and stakeholders to announce a modern, well-safe gear strategy supports this goal. It adds another tool to give Canadian seafood an advantage to grow our export markets and drive economic growth in our rural communities. Protecting the resource is a critical part of this work. Our government is committed to safe and orderly fisheries. Conservation and protection officers are doing important work to protect the resource and enforce the Fisheries Act. This past season, conservation and protection officers have seized thousands of traps, they have returned tens of thousands of lobsters to the water, and they have inspected dozens of facilities. CNP will continue to have a strong enforcement posture to manage a safe and orderly fishery, and I fully support the work of enforcement officers. Owner-operator inshore regulations are a foundation of fisheries management on the East Coast. My department is focused on strengthening the administration and enforcement of these rules to ensure our fisheries benefit those doing the work and their communities. On the West Coast, we are looking to modernize our fisheries so licensing works better for harvesters, and so the harvesters see more of the benefit from their hard work. My job as the Minister of Fisheries is to ensure we are both protecting the resource and protecting the livelihoods that depend on it. And that is how we build Canada strong. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. And with that, we're going to begin our first round of questioning, starting with Mr. Small for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to welcome the Minister and officials to our meeting here today. Minister, in August of 2025, a Clearwater Seafoods vessel, the Atlantic Protector, was caught illegally fishing for scallops in a closed area, 29D, off southwest Nova Scotia. A DFO seized approximately 50,000 pounds of scallop meat, valued at over $1 million. Now, recently, lobster harvesters in southwest Nova Scotia witnessed a Clearwater vessel transferring lobster at sea to inshore vessels. This is a violation of the quota that's used to manage the Area 1 lobster fishery. Minister, this vessel carries a tracking device, so your department knows where this vessel is at all times. Will you commit to prosecuting these poachers here today?
Thank you. It's an important question, and as I hope very clearly stated in the opening comments, I support an authorized fishery, period, full stop, regardless of where that work is taking place. And
for the 50,000 pounds of scallop meat by Clearwater. Where's that sitting? Can you tell us that?
So obviously, there's degrees of confidentiality in this work. I invite you to ask questions to the officials in the second hour. But I think, as Minister of Fisheries, it's important for me to state clearly that we work with authorized fishery. You can see the work that's happened over the past year to that end, and that work happens in multiple areas.
I just wanted to make you aware of what was going on in the lobster fishery there in southwest Nova Scotia, in case you weren't made aware. Now, Minister, a large corporation like Clearwater can evade the law, yet inshore fishermen like the cod harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador are fined on the spot for simply not being accurate enough with their estimate. Will you commit here today to the inshore fishermen that you'll change this next year and not prosecute them for being a little off on their estimate especially when they have quota remaining, and that estimate is not putting them in a position where they're exceeding their quota. Will you commit to the inshore fishermen of Newfoundland and Labrador today to fix that for next year?
Again, thank you for the question, and I am pleased to clearly once again state the rules are the same across the industry. Enforcement is what we accept, full stop.
So, do you consider an estimate that's not up to your department's accuracy standards? Do you consider that a violation of the law?
I won't speak to a specific case, and certainly, there is a second hour with officials, but I will again say I believe in authorized fishery, and we are working diligently to ensure that across the sector.
Minister, snow crab harvesters throughout Atlantic Canada are at the mercy of a precautionary approach to fisheries management that was supposed to remove peaks and valleys from their quotas from year to year. Now, this has failed, obviously. So will you commit to removing this precautionary approach from fisheries management in a species like snow crab in favor of a more stable management approach?
So again, thank you for the question, and I meet regularly with harvesters and the industry. I go back to something that I've said earlier in these meetings. This is a science-based sector, but that work happens alongside harvesters, alongside industry, so that we ensure that the information from science matches the information from harvesters. When it doesn't, there's processes to find alignment. But at the same time, I also know the economic importance of the sector to communities, and we will work, continue to work in balance.
So I'm going to get back to what the Prime Minister said last April when he said that he would listen to what he heard at the wharf. Now, these harvesters are the folks who go out and collect the data in the snow crab trap survey, but that data is being withheld from the very people who go on the water to collect it. So a start would be to provide these snow crab harvesters the results of the trap survey in a complete form that they can understand, and to show them how much of the assessment is relying on what came out of the trap survey, from the catch results, and from the trawl survey. Completely break it down and make it transparent for them. Will you do that, Minister?
So I want to actually reassure you, Mr. Small, that there's been a series of steps that we've taken over the past year to ensure that the meetings with industry, with harvesters at department, with my staff are very transparent, they're very open, and intended to remove any barriers in terms of what we share.
Okay.
That work continues, this is always work in progress in terms of how we ensure we have true dialogue.
I've got a question that I want a written response to, Mr. Chair. So, Minister, the Ottawa Citizen reported that 30 soldiers from 3RCR got severe frostbite injuries while training recently in Alaska. Now, the National Research Council has confirmed that sealskin and other fur would provide better protection than the equipment that they have, than the clothing that they have. Could you provide to the committee what you've done, tell us about conservations that you've had with DND and whatnot to create a domestic opportunity for sealskin products that would foster a domestic market at home to help balance our ecosystem in terms of predator-prey relationships. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Small. And yeah, we're over time, so if that can be an answer in writing, that would be much appreciated. So next, we're going to go to Mr. Morrissey for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll begin my question, Minister. You opened what you were referencing as a subject matter that consumes a lot of time in this committee is funding for small craft harbors. Could you expand a bit more on the difference between the base funding and the additional funding that comes from time to time?
Thank you. Yes, happy to answer the question. So the base funding, which is what we are working from at the moment, $463.3 million over 3 years, finishing in 2027, and then the A funding, $90 million. I was pleased to visit your province recently to visit the various small craft harbors and certainly understand that there are many challenges with harbors, not underestimating the impact of weather changes, storms, seascapes, pressure with water level, or wave action. So clearly understand small craft harbors are critical to the industry, and the funding, the current funding continues to 2027. We continue to meet, to dialogue, to look at ways that we can work together to ensure our harbors, which are a lifeblood of the industry, the infrastructures are protected and able to withstand the stresses both from the sector and also climate.
Thank you, Minister. And I think it's important for people because often, we push constantly for small craft harbors funding. It's not an East Coast issue. It's a West Coast issue. It's actually an Ontario issue. A lot is spent in lakes. In fact, there was a port in a riding a couple of hours from here that the department would have spent more on dredging than combined harbors in my riding. So this is a piece of it. This is infrastructure that's important across Canada to the north as well. And could you advise the committee how much has been dedicated to SCH in the past 10 years? If you don't have it with you right away, I would appreciate it if you could provide the total between the A base and the additional fundings that have come at a consistent time over the past number of years.
So over the past decade, it's $1.5 billion.
$1.5 billion?
Yes. This is significant. Small craft harbors across the country, coast to coast to coast. We know how important it is. And certainly as a government, we're committed to supporting the harbors.
And Minister, you referenced the renewal of the Atlantic Fishery Fund. I'm not sure if the numbers were attached. Is it something you can talk about at the committee this morning?
So I can't give specifics, but what I can say is the funding has been renewed. I was in Boston at the time, and my colleagues from Atlantic Region and Quebec were there. So we had a brief meeting, and I can share that there was a strong sense of cooperation and collaboration, understanding that this funding is not a continuation of the past 5 years, but an opportunity to look at the industry today, understanding what has worked well, what it is that we need to focus on, and then collectively and in partnership, and I think that's really important to understand, that it's a partnership and we address the opportunities and the concerns of this moment.
Thank you, Minister. And I know there was a lot of lobbying and there was a lot of concern amongst provinces and fishers and the fisher organization about the AFF and whether it would be renewed. Was there I don't recall, was there a similar fund within the department prior to the establishment of the AFF a number of years ago? I looked to a colleague and it was told no, so... Okay, so this is all new money that's dedicated to the fishery in collaboration with the provinces in a host of areas. So that's a critical piece of maintaining from areas of market access as well as research on the key fisheries. You and when you were in PI with me, we visited the School of Justice that trains the protection personnel now within DFO. Conservation and protection is the foundation of a successful fishery, regardless where it's at. And I can tell you, I've noticed a change in direction from the department on enforcement, on charges being laid. Could you elaborate a bit? Because I had asked a question a while back, but I don't think the answer was correct, on the resources that have been dedicated to this branch of your department and the number of personnel, additional personnel that was there after the department in conservation protection was significantly downsized by the previous government.
Thank you. It's an important question. I think some of the details can be addressed in the second hour, but I can tell you when I came into this role a year ago, it was a priority. And working with the department, we have moved forward to support the very specific policy of authorized fishing only, period. And it was wonderful to visit the center in PEI and meet with the cadets. It was an impressive group from across the country, and their dedication was inspiring. And I will say, when I travel, and I have traveled the country coast to coast to coast, I meet with fisheries harvesters in each area of the country, and I thank them for the work they do. It's often behind the scenes, but they are making a difference, and collectively it is ensuring that we have a safe and peaceful fishery.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrissey. Et prochainement, bienvenue.
Up next, welcome to committee. Marilyn Gill, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, Deputy Minister, Assistant Deputy Minister, and Director for being with us today. I will have many questions. A total of 10 minutes is not a lot of time. I'll try to make this quick. Now, you were talking about innovation and diversification and protecting the resources, and you referred to the fact that Canada is renowned internationally for its fisheries, its sustainable fisheries, but we see in the budget that there will be some cuts and compressions. Sciences are getting compressed, I think, because in 2015 we had additional budgets. We were very happy to see that, but now we're looking at compressions. So I was wondering what the reasons are behind these compressions, because you prioritized the points I made initially. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate, actually, the question. Let me be quite clear. We value science. Science management is a backbone of all the decisions, so there is no cut in science. We do look at processes, we modernize. There are new technologies that we can employ, but in no way is this a step back from a science-based fishery management.
So despite the fact that there will be changes in the budget and staff will be reduced, you're saying that you will be putting the same emphasis on the science and that it's important for you. So that's the first part of it. Will there be compressions elsewhere in other institutions that would be similar to the Maurice Lamontagne Institute in the Pacific region or in the Atlantic region? Are there compressions?
So certainly the departmental officials that are with me can answer more specific questions, but I don't want to at this point speak to specific HR shifts, but I will continue to reassure you that science-based management in the fishery is a priority, and that will continue.
Thank you. Well, along the same lines, the Sentinel Fisheries Program in Newfoundland and Labrador, in Quebec as well, this was cut on February 6th. And these are programs that had been set up because the scientific data was not sufficient. For multi-species, for instance, it wasn't deemed to be sufficient, so a decision was made to cut these programs. On the one hand, yes, we're talking about the scientific aspect of things, but food safety for the population at large and maintaining the economic activity are also key, without which economic development becomes impossible. So why did you decide to go ahead with this decision without consulting with harvesters and relevant associations? Why did you take this action, which has a significant impact? And of course, you are visiting many sites with regard to the fisheries, but strong impacts in some parts of the country. So this goes against the food safety and the scientific aspect of things for populations that are faced with challenging situations in remote areas specifically.
So again, I think there's an opportunity to ask officials in the second hour. What I want to reassure you that science is still core to this work. We can update science management. It's prudent to do that based on emerging technologies. But I also want to reassure you that we remain in consultation and dialogue with harvesters in industry. So in no way is it a surprise to industry when something changes, but it is about understanding that we have to evolve, and there are improvements in how we collect data, and we need to be able to ensure that our scientific information is aligned with the best possible information. But please let me reassure you, it is always in consultation.
Madame la ministre, couper le
Thank you, Minister, but cutting the program will not let you get more information or collect more data. I talked to stakeholders, and they told me that they had not been consulted. They did not receive any information. They just received a letter, and they were surprised. And I'm also surprised. But you keep saying that we need to rest assured, but these programs are being cut, and this has a wide impact. That is why maybe it will be a good idea to really be in direct contact with these communities that are impacted. Maybe in the next hour you will ask me to ask the following question, but the departments, of course, are all interconnected. For instance, again, radio meteo program was also cut, and harvesters were not consulted, and they don't always have network everywhere. So again, why did you decide to make this, go ahead with this compression without consulting with the relevant stakeholders, without knowing what kind of an impact this could have on them if you were to proceed with this kind of a cut? You might say this is not within your department, but again, this would have required a discussion between the different departments. So what would come in and replace this program, Minister?
And again, happy for the officials to be more specific, but I will reassure you again that science is the backbone of what we do. The science management evolves based on emerging technologies. The need to remain in dialogue and communication is critical. I will tell you, I was in Quebec City recently, and Montreal, continued to meet with harvesters from that region. I will be visiting the Magdalens in the next couple of weeks. I continue to visit communities. Processes are in place so people can feel that they've been heard. Happy to have the officials speak to this in the second hour, but certainly relationships, communication are critical, and science is a backbone always in concert with harvesters in industry. So in no way is that being shifted or compromised.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gill. And this is the end of the first round.
With Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, and officials for being here. Minister, you just stated that you value science, and science is the background of what we do. It's widely accepted that monitoring is essential to the decisions that you make. Minister, Canadians are concerned that by cuts that you've planned for the coming year. A 2025 academic report, researcher Emma Atkinson found that almost 2/3 of historically monitored salmon populations have no reported estimates for 2014 to 2023, the worst decade for data since broad-scale surveys began in the 1950s. And yet here you are slashing more monitoring. This is dangerously reckless. Monitoring is an essential component of the wild salmon policy and in determining sustainability that you also talked about. The ambassadors were amazed at. So you say monitoring is essential to, would you say that monitoring is essential to your decisions? Why are you, and if so, why are you slashing fisheries monitoring?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And let me reassure you, we are not in any way stepping back from science monitoring, understanding stock health, but we can.
Huge budget cuts. There's huge budget cuts in the monitoring.
So, We have shifted to to different types of monitoring, in-stream monitoring, for example, but in no way are we cutting science from the work that we do. But it is
But you
appropriate
are.
that we evolve.
Has your department done comparative analysis of the new and the previous monitoring systems to ensure that the new assessments retain the reliability in monitoring?
A question that certainly the officials can
No, it's a
address.
question that you should be able to answer because it's your budget that has made these decisions.
I am trying to answer you. What I'm saying to you very clearly is science and science management is the backbone of the work that we do. That is not changing. We will shift and modernize how we collect science. That is what we need to do to ensure that we have the information we need to make decisions.
Can you answer whether you've made those comparative studies I just mentioned?
The specifics on a comparative study, I will have the official speak to in the second hour, but I will tell you when I receive
So you don't
briefings. In a
You
specific,
don't know.
I receive briefing notes on a regular basis. What we look at are comparative data as part of that evaluation. What I can reassure you is that
You just
science
don't know
is
today
still the
because that's what I
backbone.
asked you. Minister, there are 7,000 stocks broken into 427 conservation units of wild Pacific salmon that require adequate monitoring to be managed. How can Canadians believe you can manage fisheries sustainable while you're eliminating basic monitoring programs?
I want to reassure you, we are not eliminating science and science management from
But where do the
salmon
budget
stocks.
cuts fall then in the monitoring?
I think there may be a little confusion in terms of budget, what you mean by budget cuts. What we are seeing happen, and Atlantic Fish Funds are an example, BC Shrift is an example of
No,
funding.
we're talking the
that-
entire budget. There's huge cuts in salmon monitoring.
So I think it may be a disconnect in what you're saying and what I'm trying to explain to you. There are a series of funding streams that are coming forward. BC Shrift is one that is intended to support management of fisheries, and we will see more of this. So I want to reassure you, this is not about cutting
Okay, we're
the
not
work
getting the
that we're
answers
doing.
that Canadians are
Well,
looking for.
maybe the way you're
So,
looking for it.
Minister, you say you've balanced science in the decision, but you've prioritized cuts to the genomics program at DFO's Molecular Genetics Lab in Nanaimo that has developed molecular tools now integral to managing risks to protect salmon populations. Why have you made cuts to the genomics program?
I'm going to let the official speak to specifics. What I can tell you, which is what I've been saying, is the work of science continues. We need to evaluate where are we accessing the information that we need, modernizing,
So
shifting.
you can't answer why you're cutting the
I'm not
funding for the
prepared to answer
genomics
to a
lab.
specific area, but I'm telling you
That's what
that
we're
the
asking.
focus.
Okay, Minister, one more very important question on the West Coast. A few months ago, your ministry released its discussion paper on the salmon allocation policy review. That paper contains a proposed removal of the priority public access for Chinook and coho salmon. Another example where you're creating a problem where none exists. Minister, has your ministry completed an economic analysis for the proposed removal of the public fishery access for Chinook and coho salmon?
Thank you. Important question. I will start by saying the allocation, the policy came into play in 1999, so appropriate that we review this. There was a year-long consultation process, ended at the end of January. We are still going through that what we heard, and I will have something for you
Question
coming
was,
forward. But no decision
have you
has been
done an
made.
economic analysis?
So we're at time.
Thank you.
So I'm going to have to cut it off there, but there will be another opportunity for questions. With that, I'm going to take the next round, the 5-minute round. Thank you, Minister and officials, for being here today to speak to the estimates. I do want to continue on along the line that a couple of my colleagues had brought up. DFO is facing cuts of nearly 30% compared to roughly 15% across other agencies, and that's excluding the changes from the transition from the Coast Guard to National Defence. And as part of that, there's a 78% reduction in funding for the Salmon Enhancement Program and similar cuts in aquatic species and habitat restoration. And so given DFO's mandate to conserve and protect fish and marine habitats, how does the department expect that these reductions are going to affect conservation outcomes?
So, thank you. And again, an important question. What I want to clarify is certainly the cuts reflect changes in the department and the role with Coast Guard, and it was a point in time. So we are seeing, for example, BC Shrift coming forward just days ago. So in no way is the work of conservation, protection, support for the fisheries across the country, coast to coast to coast. No way has that priority shifted. We will see programs come on stream during the next year, but I want to be really clear that the science-based management, the focus on fisheries has not changed.
Thank you, Minister. And you mentioned BC Shrift. Beyond that funding, what else could you share with the committee of programming to fill some of this gap?
So certainly, once, as we move forward, I will certainly let you know as funding streams come on side. I can't give you specific dates, but certainly we know the work is important, and the support for the industry, the BC, northern regions, Atlantic regions, inland, that work will continue. But I'm not able to give you timelines today.
No, of course. I wasn't asking for timelines, but rather with specific programs. But I'm going to move on here. So as part of the CER, the Comprehensive Expenditure Review, DFO is planning to cut 551 full-time equivalents over the next few years. And this concerns me greatly when I look at my riding, where 30 years ago on the Sunshine Coast, there were 6 DFO officials that were working there. And then in 2012, the Conservatives shut down the DFO office that was there. And it's been exceedingly difficult ever since then to actually enforce illegal fishing in that part of my riding. And now there's only one staff person on the Sunshine Coast, and this person is serving in a community advisor role, providing essential work, working with First Nations, with nonprofits, and solving many of the fisheries issues that we're seeing on the Sunshine Coast. But I understand now this person's actually been given notice after working with DFO for over 3 decades. And so with these types of changes, how are we going to be able to ensure that DFO has a footprint on the ground, both to tackle illegal fishing and to ensure that the type of habitat restoration and partnerships can lead to the restoration work that's necessary to have a sustainable fishery?
Thank you. And I can't speak to a particular HR issue, but I will tell you that across the country, the work of the Department of DFO happens in regions. 80% of the staff are in regions, and that is not going to change. Particular situation, I'm not even sure if the officials can speak to that, but certainly a question for them. I will tell you that enforcement is a priority across the country, and will continue to be a priority. And so, let me reassure you and others in your area that both of those considerations are paramount. They are not changing, but a particular case, no, I can't speak to that.
No, that's well understood. And Minister, you brought up the announcement from a few weeks ago about the launch of negotiations for the new fisheries agreements across the country. And you mentioned you are going to be speaking with Minister Neil from BC in short order. But there is some concern across the province about the changing focus of these agreements. BC Shrift to date has been primarily focused on conservation and habitat restoration work. And there is concern that with this new proposal that's going to change significantly. Can you clarify for this committee that is going to be able to remain a potential focus of this agreement if that's in the interest or the request from the province?
So actually, welcome the question. And it was only the last couple of days that it was last week when the announcement was made. And very much the framework happens with provinces, with counterparts across the country. So nothing is imposed. So in Atlantic, or in Boston when I met with Atlantic and Quebec counterparts, it was very much specific to shared understanding of what the priorities would be and how we would do this work together, and I will do the same thing with BC. So it's not imposing anything, but I think I want to just be really clear that it is appropriate to look at a program after 5 years and say, what has worked well? Where did we miss? the focus and then understand a new round of funding is an opportunity to look at very targeted results, understanding that things have shifted. So it is an opportunity for us to ensure we meet the concerns and the realities of regions.
Thank you, Minister. Et prochainement, on va à Madame Gill.
And then to Ms. Gill for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a question about exploratory permits with regard to lobster. Of course, these are different companies that are taking on the expenditure and covering the fees for the licenses in Quebec. But harvesters are in a situation where they are fishing in regions where no lobster is deemed to be present. So this might be a budget question, but when you want to develop, economically speaking, the different regions and you want to look after the vitality of the fisheries communities, well, what you need are permits that will allow harvesters to go and do what they need to do, and then to get the resources they need. So especially with regard to Zone 18, maybe we need zones that are bigger than the 6 we have, because this is causing difficulty to harvesters, and this is known by the DFO. So we need quick changes in this area. So if they want to go to a different location, they don't have the funds and they don't have the resources. So that would be another question. Thank you.
So I've met with harvesters in the region. It is an exploratory license, so science-based. We so it's a couple of years we collect data at the same time as providing access for harvesters who otherwise would not be able to participate in the fishery. And we will continue to remain in dialogue. We will continue to look at science, but pleased that we were able to continue for another season.
But there is no data, and this is known by DFO, and there will never be data because they're not allowed to go out and get this data. So things really need to change. I think that's the main question. There's no lobster in those zones, so it's really not helping that much. One last question. Transport Canada owns some installations. Previously, there were no routes, but communities such as Notakwan, indigenous communities, they want to make use of this wharf, for instance, and this could be included in the Small Craft Harbors program. And indigenous communities, First Nations, are also asking for this. So the Bay John Beats community, and it is there should be maybe additional efforts to diversify economic activity at this location. Thank you.
We remain in dialogue. we remain in dialogue. And I just touch on, when we evaluate catch, that's also a source of data. So we always collect data, and that's the reason for the partnership with harvesters in industry. It's all important at understanding what the health of a stock looks like in the region.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Gill. And
thank you very much, Ms. Gill.
Mr. Gunn for 5 minutes.
Minister, the last time we spoke, you accused fishermen of spreading misinformation relating to MPAs and the government's plan to close significant areas of BC's coast to fishing. And yet, we recently learned from Kathy Graham, the DFO Director of Marine Planning and Conservation, that your government is still planning to implement the UN's 30 by 30 framework, and that the department's previously released drafts, the ones that showed massive closures along BC's coast, were still the basis for what is planned going forward. So my question for you, Minister, is would you like to use this opportunity to apologize to fishermen, their families, and coastal communities, and acknowledge that, yes, the government is planning to close areas of BC's coast to fishing?
What I will say to you is what I said the last time I was here. I believe we can do both. I believe that we can move forward with conservation sustainability.
What do you mean by
and
do both? What do you mean by do both?
At the same time, if you could allow me to finish, at the same time, we support fisheries. We can do both in marine protected areas, and I certainly will work to ensure both happen.
So I appreciate that your argument that there are no trade-offs in this. I obviously disagree, but what I'm trying to get on the record, because we've had deflections and evasions on this question, is the department planning to close areas of BC's coast to fishing, yes or no? And do you acknowledge that marine closures have real economic effects?
What I will say to you, which is what I've just said, marine protected areas enable us to have conservation sustainability for the next generation, but also maintain fishing.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And we can do both, and it's important that we do both. I'm not able to say more than that to you, so no, I'm not going to answer the other question.
So you can't give a yes or no question?
Because it's about balance, sir. It's about balance, and we can do both.
Okay, that's fine, but I'm asking you some simple yes or no questions so we can get a framework for what is happening. Yes or no, is the department planning to close areas of fishing off BC's coast as part of the marine planning area plan? Yes or no?
The officials are going to speak in the next hour, so you're welcome to ask them. What I will say to you is that I believe in marine protected areas we can do both. We can support fishing because that is an economic driver.
Are you planning closures, yes or no?
I can answer
That's what marine planning areas are. They're closures.
You can ask
They're
the
not jet
officials
ski
in the
parks
second
or
hour.
people are going water skiing. What are they? They're closures by definition.
What I believe is we need to have conservation sustainability so the next generation are able to also participate in fisheries. It is our role.
I understand all that. I'm just trying to get a simple yes or no answer out of you.
You're trying to bait an answer, and I am telling you,
to get the truth.
We can do both. And
you can
beyond
do both
that,
what?
We can
close
have
areas?
fishing. We can have fishing activity, and we can also promote sustainability.
Are you planning to close areas to fishing on BC's coast?
We can have balance.
Balance of what? So a balance of closing areas and still having that's the entire point of marine planning areas, is to close, to restrict access for various forms of fishing in various areas. Do you agree that is the point of marine planning areas?
We can circle around this for the rest of the time I have today, but I will answer exactly the same way.
Are you still using draft scenario 2 as the basis for marine planning areas planning framework, as was reported by your Director General, Kathy Graham? Yes or no?
You're welcome to ask these questions to officials in the next hour. I will answer the same way. We need to have balance. We need to maintain conservation sustainability.
So
and
you're considering adopting the UN 30 by 30 framework without closing any areas to any forms of fishing whatsoever?
I believe we need balance.
You're evading the question. I'm asking a very simple question.
I'm answering in the capacity of Minister of Fisheries.
You're not answering the question, Minister.
We can do both.
You're not answering the question. You can sit here and say, I am going to close areas of fishing, and I believe it's in the best interest of Canada. But you can't sit here and just not tell people the truth, not tell fishermen the truth. So why don't you just acknowledge on the record that you're planning to close these areas to fishing?
You just don't want to hear what I'm saying. We can
You're evading the question, trying to prevent yourself from going on record, acknowledging what everyone knows to be the case, which is large closures are coming to British Columbia's coast over the next few years if you want to meet the UN's 30 by 30 framework.
Within a marine protected area, we can honor fisheries, and we can also protect and conserve for the next generation. It is balance, and I believe in balanced
no
approaches.
Fisheries are going to be losing access. You're not going to. The prawns are going to lose 30% of access on the Central Coast, as per DFO's draft scenario 2.
I believe we need to stay at a table. We need to always remain in communication, and we can have balanced approaches.
You're not answering the question. Fishermen deserve the truth in this country. Just level with them of what the government is planning to do, or if you don't know, say that too.
We will move forward with balanced approaches.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunn. Next, we're going to go to Mr. Connors for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, and thank you, officials, for coming out today. My first question is going to be around the use of artificial intelligence and digital. As part of the 15% reduction, DFR is saying that we're going to leverage artificial intelligence and other digital tools to modernise Canada's fisheries management system. Can you elaborate on that? What type of artificial intelligence and what digital tools will be used and how they will be used?
So thank you. It's a good question. So, for example, e-logs that we're seeing on the water, which really helps us understand science, catch management, that's a form of digitalization. And I think it's incredibly important when we understand that the markets are changing. We need to diversify. Having data from harvesters, and it links back to the need to ensure that we understand what harvesters see, because they do have knowledge that's incredibly important. But e-logs help us see that in real time. It helps inform science, and it helps with certifications that strengthen our ability to diversify market access.
So my second question to that would be, have you heard any concerns from fishers about the introduction of artificial intelligence, digital equipment? I know last year when it was introduced in Newfoundland, some lobster fishermen were concerned about having to use e-logs.
Change is always challenging, and certainly I visited a number of wharves and had direct conversations. I know officials were there as well. We learn each year how we can strengthen processes going forward. Also, I know that there were some challenges with the technologies being ready. And again, it's part of how we learn from one year to the next. Technologies evolve quickly. We will, I'm sure, be ready for this season, and it was in Newfoundland and Labrador, but parts of Atlantic Canada. It's important that we have access to the data that informs science, that allows us to have the information we need to strengthen market diversification, the price that harvesters and industry receive for our products. We know we have a world-class product. I heard that over and over in Boston. And so certifications ensure that harvesters industry receive the highest price for a product that is world-class. So, it's fisheries management and its input in science. So it's a positive, but we'll continue to work with harvesters so they are able to use the technologies in a way that I think has a positive outcome for all involved.
Minister, I also want to give you an opportunity to give an update on where we're to for the recreational food fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador. We did the survey, and many recreational fishers are anxiously awaiting what the outcome will be.
Thank you, and I'm really pleased with the response to the survey. Just off 2,000 or 10,000 people participated. It's really significant, and 95% of those were from Newfoundland and Labrador. 96% had participated in the fishery more than 2 times. So really good information. We're still working through that data. It will be out, obviously, before the season would open. And I just want to reassure all concerned that the information we heard or we received will help inform the decisions going forward.
From fishers in my recreational fishers in my area that they'd like to know as early as possible. So I'd really urge you to get that out as quickly as possible. Minister, you mentioned you visited the Boston Food Show, and I know that you're working with other departments to open up markets around the world, I guess. Can you elaborate on a little bit of how that work is going and what new markets will be opening up?
I can tell you very clearly, it was obvious to me that the world wants Canada's seafood. We have a sustainable industry. The fishery is economically sourced or ethically sourced, and there is high demand for our product. And it's on all of us to work together to ensure that we have the certifications that many of these new markets want, and those certifications result in the highest price for the industry and for harvesters. But I am optimistic about the opportunities for markets around the world. We obviously still work to ensure the markets that we have remain open, but it's prudent on us at the same time to continue to expand.
Much, Mr. Connors. Just looking at the time here, Mr. Arnold.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It's concerning that the minister has repeatedly said that she can't answer questions, and yet that's what she's here for. parliamentary functions with fundamental conventions that include ministerial accountability. Mr. Chair, I'd ask you to remind the minister that her duty to uphold the principle of ministerial accountability.
Chair, I'm not sure if that's a point of order.
The minister has stated that no science will be cut.
That's not a point
But the
of order.
current lead of the genomics program in Nanaimo has been given notice that his position will be.
Mr. Chair, this is debate. This is not a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Arnold, I hear you, but this is not a point of order, and we would like to get a little bit more questioning in here, so there will be a short additional round here. But with that, I'm going to do 3 minutes and 3 minutes to wrap this up. Just going to start a little bit late. Mr. Small, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
That's okay. Mr. Chair, we're on a first-name basis. But, so my question to the minister is on the Sentinel cod surveys being cut this year due to cuts in the budget. The Sentinel cod surveys in Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec, which have been a tool in understanding where the rebuilding processes were over the years, are now being completely eliminated. And it's understandable on the Labrador coast and on the northeast coast and the east coast of Newfoundland, where these stocks are pretty much in the healthy zone. But cod on the south and the west coast of Newfoundland and in the 4R portion of Labrador and 4R ST and in Quebec and the Maritimes, these stocks are portrayed to be deep into the below the cautious zone. So why would you cut a tool that you've relied on, that's been proven over time to be a great help in knowing the health of these stocks? Why would you cut that in areas where the stocks are below the cautious zone?
Thank you for the question. It's interesting, and I appreciate your acknowledgement that cod stocks, health of the cod stocks vary around the province, because that wasn't reflected in a recent private member's bill. But what I will say to you is we are committed to robust science. It is appropriate that how we collect data shifts based on modernizing the scientific tools available to us, but in no way is it a step back from solid science management.
So if there's no commercial fishery, if there's no Sentinel fishery, if there's a limited recreational fishery to just weekends, and we have to rely on DFO science, which has been proven to be a bit dodgy over the years, how are we ever going to get a picture for the fishing industry of what's accurately in water?
No decisions have been made around recreational fisheries, as you know. I mentioned that a moment ago. What I will say to you is science.
Why would you cut that Sentinel program in areas that still need it?
Robust science is critical to fisheries. That is not changing. The methods that we use to collect data shifts based on modernizing
So it's becoming less robust. You just said that you need robust science, but you're making it less robust.
I can assure you science around cod is robust and will continue to be robust.
Thank you very much, Mr. Small. We're going to conclude with 3 minutes from Mr. Morrissey.
Chair and Minister, I will give you the chance to answer the questions that I have. The oyster industry in PEI is facing a crisis, and all indications are it will spread to neighboring provinces. And this industry will depend heavily on the Atlantic Fishery Fund, as one example, for support programs going forward. I know you're well into working on some of those. Could you just briefly, because then I want to pivot to Mr. McKinnon, we don't often have the presidency FIA before the committee. But if you could just comment briefly on how the department is preparing to support this vital industry, and we should all be confident that there will be a future if we get the steps right.
So let me begin by saying I have met with industry and with harvesters, and I know how difficult this is. And back to the newest version of AFF and it not being a continuation of what happened in the last 5 years, that is an example. That the need to look at current state is an example. Oysters are one example of why that's so important. Circumstances change, markets change, health of a stock changes. And so we need to be able to ensure that the funds, the supports are there to meet the concerns of industry and harvesters. And so in fairness, yes, oysters are an example of work that we need to do to help the industry recover from where they are, understand why this has happened. The work of research is an important tool here, but we're here to work with them.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that support. But on this one, science is going to be vital. There is a future. Areas have shown outside of PEI that the industry can rebound and thrive. But we have to depend heavily on science to get it right. So, Mr. McKenna, can you update to the committee where CFIA is at with all the extensive tests you've been doing as to the ability to import seed to PEI, oyster seed?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll say a few words, even though I'm officially not at CFIA now.
Okay.
We're working very closely with the industry on PEI, and including with Atlantic Aqua Farms and UNDA, as you may know. We're doing a scientific risk assessment now at CFIA.
FO side, then that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, just to sum up, the scientific risk assessment from CFIA should be done very shortly, and I think you'll be seeing the fruits of that work within a very short period of time.
Thank you, Chair.
And with that, that's going to conclude our first panel. I would like to thank the Minister for taking the time to meet with us, as well as the departmental officials. I'm going to suspend for a few minutes to allow the Minister to depart, and then we're going to continue questions to officials for the second hour.